Got to admit it, things aren't looking great for the New Orleans Saints as they continue to lose free agents and not add any. We got all that and a little bit of lanyap for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? I'm your host, Ross Jackson, New Orleans native, your New Orleans Saints expert, credentialed member of the media, covering those New Orleans Saints as a senior writer and reporter over at Saints News Network. And on today's episode of Locked On Saints, Andrus Peat headed to free agency, but is there a chance we see him back in the black and gold? Meanwhile, over on the defensive side, Isaac Yiadom, the standout cornerback from last year, set to take a visit from the Washington Commanders, or with the Washington Commanders. What does it mean for the Saints? What does it mean for Yiadom? And what does it potentially mean for Marshon Lattimore? And to kick us all off today, are the Saints free agency losses indicative of some trouble in Denmark, as they say? We got all that coming up for you on today's episode. We appreciate you very much for making Locked On Saints your first listen and for being an everydayer here on the show. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code Locked On for $20 off of your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed with Game Time. So the New Orleans Saints. Okay, so here's the thing. There's a difference between not being super aggressive in free agency and taking a patient approach and losing all of your outgoing free agents. Those are two different things, right? One of the things that we expected was that this team was not going to be super active early on in free agency. Now, they did get a contract done earlier than we expected. They signed Willie Gay, the standout super athletic linebacker. That's going to be a great addition to this New Orleans Saints defense, but he was not a top-end signing. We didn't expect them to have many top-end signings this year. And when I say top-end, I don't mean talent-wise. I mean contract number-wise, dollar amount. That's all I mean. The reason why is because what we expected was for the Saints to do what they usually do, which is restructure and retain. That's usually their biggest focus when free agency opens up. Retain the talent that they believe in. So with guys like Zack Baun signing elsewhere, Lonnie Johnson signing elsewhere, even though it seemed like there were some contract negotiations between Lonnie Johnson and the New Orleans Saints. Lonnie seemed like he simply got more money to go back to Houston. Good call. And then Malcom Roach, who, as I understand it, the Saints also had an offer in on, but sounds like he got a better offer in Denver, 2 years, $8 million. Unlikely that the Saints were going to offer him that. So either they don't value the players as much as what their dollar amounts are out on the open market, or the players don't value the Saints, right? Either one can be true. To an extent, both can be true. And in some cases, neither can be true. In some cases, the Saints might actually feel that this player has a real opportunity and that they're willing to pay this player, but that player wants to be closer to home. And it has nothing to do with the Saints nor the player, except for the player, it has everything to do with their family, things like that, right? So sometimes those are the decisions, but we can acknowledge the optics. There's nothing wrong with acknowledging the optics of a team that is playing the patient game, but isn't getting any benefit from it because they're not even retaining their own players. We're even hearing now that another, not star player, but standout player in Isaac Yiadom is about to take a visit with the Washington Commanders. We're going to be breaking that down and what that specifically could mean for him, for the Saints, and for potentially Marshon Lattimore here in a moment. But it does perk up your ears, it does pique your interest to think that, hey, things might not necessarily be going to plan for the New Orleans Saints in free agency. Now, here's what I will say. Just so that I like exploring the optics, I like acknowledging the optics, but we should also take a look at what the other reality here could be, which is that the Saints have a price amount or a dollar amount that they've always sort of had set for the role that they'll play in New Orleans. Now, here's where I think sometimes the disconnect in free agency happens. Let's go back to Kaden Ellis, right? Last offseason. The Saints had a price point, I assume, that they would have been willing to pay Kaden Ellis to stay in New Orleans. I don't think that there was anything about them not valuing Kaden Ellis or that they didn't want Kaden Ellis back. I'm sure that they did. However, he would have been behind Demario Davis. He would have been behind Pete Werner. So with that being the case, what were you going to pay him based on that role versus what the Atlanta Falcons were willing to pay him for a starting role? He was clearly going to get more money as a starter than he was going to get as, at best, a rotational piece here in New Orleans in the second level, and maybe to help you rush the passer, kind of play the Zack Baun role that Zack Baun didn't play into the last handful of games. Now, you want to talk about a player that maybe the Saints didn't value the way that they should have, Zack Baun, right? Like, that's a pretty clear indication based on the fact that they didn't value the role that he could have played. He had 12 and a half sacks coming out of Wisconsin. It was the thing that was supposed to make him a first-round pick. He drops all the way to the third round. Rumor is that the Saints were willing to take him in the first round if they really wanted to, or if they felt that they needed to, but they waited, and then he ended up there in the third round, and they drafted him to do not what he did in college. There's an example of the value not being there for the role. Different than the role not meeting the value, which is what happened with Caden Ellis. He got better value on the market to play a different role than he would have played in New Orleans. Same thing happened with C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I know nobody wants to admit it, but one of the big reasons why the Saints ended up moving on from C.J. Gardner-Johnson is because they wanted to pay him as a slot corner. He wanted to be paid as a safety, but he wasn't playing safety in New Orleans. He was playing slot corner, and also tumultuous, right? That everybody knows all the weird things that were going on with all that. So that made sense. The role didn't fit the bill. But Malcom Roach, could the bill have fit the role there? I think so. 2 years, $8 million, that's not hard to work around. He was a guy that you needed. He was a guy that was big for you. I think it was a 17.4% run stop rate, according to Pro Football Focus, the best in the NFL for the 12 games that he was able to appear before he had that significant knee injury that shut him down for the last 5 games. He was your run stopper, and your run defense did not take a step forward in 2023. So losing him isn't going to help it take a step forward in 2024. So now you have to address that. Now, here's where the immediate reaction can be different from down the road, right? When we see how everything plays out. If the Saints lose these guys, Zack Baun and Malcom Roach over on the defensive side, let's just start there, right? But then they sign Chase Young, you kind of forget that they lost Malcom Roach and they lost Zack Baun. The Saints lose Andrus Peat, but then they go out there and they sign Dalton Risner, you kind of forget that they lost Andrus Peat. So there's still time to figure all of this out and get on the right track if you're the New Orleans Saints. But I do wonder if there is some sense of things not going as planned. And I think one of the biggest sort of things that feels most indicative of that, or has the optics of that, let's say, because what we're feeling might not be fact. What we're seeing might not be the whole story. But the one move right now that could potentially make you really feel like, oh, things might not be going as planned, is the potential loss of cornerback Isaac Yiadom. Let's break that down in terms of why that would be indicative of that, what the loss would mean for New Orleans, Isaac Yiadom, and what all of this could mean for Marshon Lattimore as well. Got that coming up for you as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode of Locked On Saints is brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time is my favorite place to go to pick up tickets for my favorite sporting events, music, comedy, theater, so much more. They've got it wherever you are. So make sure you check them out today over on the Game Time app. I use the Game Time app all the time when I want to buy some tickets to go to a last-minute Pelicans game or something like that. I almost used it last night. Thankfully, I didn't because the Pelicans got stomped by the Cleveland Cavaliers. But, you know, even if I did, I wouldn't have felt too bad about it because tickets are mad affordable with all of their flash deals, all their all-in pricing, and I would have been able to see the view of my seats before I bought them with Game Time, taking all the guesswork out of buying tickets over at Game Time, and you can too. Just download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDON for $20 off of your first order. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use the promo code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, family, the New Orleans Saints could potentially lose a player that absolutely blossomed in their system last year. But while it could be bad news, it could be good news as well. That's what we got coming up for you next here on today's episode of Locked On Saints. We appreciate you very much for making us your first listen of the day every day. Hey, don't forget, March 20th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Locked On Sports Today, the first ever national sports 24/7 YouTube stream. You're going to be able to find our MLB season preview featuring all the local experts from Locked On covering those MLB teams. March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Once again, you can find that MLB season preview on Locked On Sports Today, the live streaming channel on YouTube, or for free on the free Amazon Channels app as well. All right, so as we look at what's happening next for the New Orleans Saints, right, trying to project what's happening next, one of the things that we always kind of look at is, can they retain the talent that they want to retain? And that feels like either A, they have not wanted to retain much of the talent that has hit free agency this year. And to be fair, not a lot of A-list names have been becoming free agents this year that we already didn't expect the Saints not to retain. Jameis Winston, we knew that he was very unlikely to be back in 2024, though I thought it would have been a statement to keep him, but now he's on his way to Cleveland to back up Deshaun Watson and probably eventually start some games over in Cleveland. I have zero faith in Deshaun Watson. And then you have to look at Michael Thomas, another one that we kind of knew this was going to be the swan song for an otherwise like fluctuatingly brilliant career and time in New Orleans. And I say fluctuating in that sometimes it was brilliant, sometimes that it wasn't. So I think that like those names were the A-list names that we knew were going to be available, right? That were outgoing free agents for New Orleans, but we knew that the Saints were very unlikely to bring either of those guys back. So then now we're watching all of the other guys that end up kind of hitting the market, and some of them we kind of expected them to come back, and Isaac Yiadom's absolutely one of them. Now, look, do the Saints have what they need at cornerback even if Isaac Yiadom departs? Sure, but you've already lost Marcus May. Then if you turn around and lose Isaac Yiadom, who looked really, really good in your system last year, he led the NFL last season, according to Pro Football Focus, amongst all corners that played at least 200 snaps in the NFL in coverage, with in forcing completion percentage with 30. He had 14 pass breakups last year, his first interception since his rookie season back with Denver, all of that. Like, he absolutely blossomed in this New Orleans Saints defense, despite the fact that he was originally brought in to be a special teams guy. Remember, that was the first stint with the New Orleans Saints, was him coming in as a core special teamer, helping out as a gunner and all those other things when JT Gray was dealing with injury, all that. So now there's the potential that Isaac Yiadom ends up signing elsewhere. He's taking a visit, according to Jeremy Fowler over at ESPN, with the Washington Commanders, who I don't know if you've been paying attention to the Washington Commanders free agent so far, but they're signing literally everyone. Like, they're just throwing money all around and all this other stuff, which I like, good for them. And so is Isaac Yiadom going to be next on the list? Now, there's a couple of things to look at here. This could be just Isaac Yiadom's representation doing a good job of saying, hey, don't take the contract with the team that you're with immediately. Don't take the first contract that comes to you. Let's go see what your market gets and then see if you can potentially get some more money from the team that does want to keep you. It's a good move. It's a smart move. If I had an agent, that's what I would want my agent to do for me, right? I would want my agent to say, hey, before you renew your contract with Locked On, I don't have a contract. I'm never leaving. I mean, I have a contract, but mine won't expire. I'm never leaving. But let's say that it was a term contract. Hey, before you re-sign with Locked On, let's go and shop you to Fox Sports. Let's go and shop you to the other networks and things like that and see what kind of money you might be able to get. And then if you want to go back to Locked On, at least you have a number to be able to show them, or you go back and take their offer, but make sure they have an offer on the table for you before you go and look somewhere else. So like, it's just the wise thing to do. It's the right move. So that could be what it is that's happening. And that happens a lot. That happens often. We actually saw that last year with Malcom Roach. Malcom Roach, the Saints wanted to keep him. He was perfectly fine with staying with the New Orleans Saints, but he went out, he tested the market, went around. You saw Shy Tuttle get some money over in Carolina. He saw David Onyemata get some money over in Atlanta. And so he went and shopped around. Maybe the deals weren't what the Saints were offering, or maybe the pull back to his home state was more important to him. And so he returned and re-signed with the New Orleans Saints. We see this happen pretty often. We actually saw it with Jameis Winston too. Jameis a couple years ago had one where he was supposed to get on a flight to Indianapolis, but then he signed a contract with the Saints and said, y'all keep your plane. You know what I mean? And so like, we see those types of things pretty often. So that's what this could be. But man, it's just the what if, right? It's the optics of the what if. If the Saints were to lose Isaac Yiadom, You've already moved on from Marcus May, who, let's be honest, you didn't get what you thought you were going to get from Marcus May anyway. You got more from Jonathan Abram. You got more from Jordan Howden. You want to see that. But they also haven't re-signed Jonathan Abram, which adds this conversation. So when you look at the secondary, Lonnie Johnson heads somewhere else. Jonathan Abram hasn't been signed by the Saints or anywhere else yet. Isaac Yiadom's taking visits with other teams. They've moved on from Marcus May, which we kind of expected. And then there's the potential trade for Marshon Lattimore. So it just feels like a lot of potential attrition from the Saints secondary. Now, even if all of that happened, you'd still have Tyrann Mathieu and Jordan Howden at safety. Like, even if all those players that I just named, those 5 players, were not Saints in 2024 for whatever rhyme or reason, just bear with me here. If that were to happen, the Saints would still have Tyrann Mathieu. They would still have Jordan Howden at safety. They would still have Paulson Adebo outside. They would be able to move Alontae Taylor where he's best, which is outside. They need to find a new slot corner, and then they need to rebuild their depth on the secondary, which between Dennis Allen, between Marcus Robertson, and between Joe Woods, you have enough players that those guys have worked with, scouted, coached, mentored, trained, whatever, have relationships with that they could potentially get them to come here to New Orleans. So they'd be able to rebuild it, but what a difference it would be. What a difference it would be. You'd be looking at it almost an entirely new secondary at that point. And so I don't know if the New Orleans Saints, whose secondary was the best part of their team last year, not just the defense, but their team last year, I don't think the Saints want to go through a situation where they have to entirely rebuild their secondary. I don't think that would be a good time. And so now we look at this Isaac Yiadom visit and go, okay, well, certainly if that visit turns into a signing, and by the way, other teams are also interested in Isaac Yiadom, no way that you trade Marshon Lattimore, right? Like, no way that you could do that, because Isaac Yiadom was one of your replacement options for that very player. He was one of the reasons that you kind of went, you know what? If the Saints traded Marshon Lattimore, it would be a bad choice. They would take a hit because of that, but they'd still have good play on the perimeter. You could still have good play on the perimeter, but you're one deep. You're one deep. Paulson Adebo, Alontae Taylor, and then what after that? So for me, this is indicative of maybe things not necessarily going the way that the Saints had planned, but could also be indicative of, assuming that Isaac Yiadom signs elsewhere, the Saints mending the fence, if you will, when it comes to the situation around Marshon Lattimore. And there's no guarantee that Isaac Yiadom doesn't just return to New Orleans. He, like I said, he could just be testing his market, coming back, maybe getting a little bit more money than what the New Orleans Saints might have put on the table had they have made an offer already, which I'd be shocked if they didn't. So I have to see how it all plays out. But boy, the optics are definitely worth kind of giving a little bit of side eye to, for sure. Now, one departure that I think will be a departure that I don't think really messes with the optics is Andrus Peat. Let me explain to you why as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hey, did you know that even if you have a 401k, you can still have an IRA? Well, Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar that you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar that you transfer from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, and no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most of your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good only through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing includes risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold from 1 year from the date of your first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA is available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Andrus Peat, New Orleans Saints offensive lineman, was not re-signed before the new league year and is now a free agent. But I tell you what, the optics are very, very different when it comes to this one, because I think this was the right move for the New Orleans Saints, no matter how much it might sting the pocketbook. We appreciate you very much for being here. Don't forget, we are your team every day. So we'll be back with you either later on today if there's a big signing, or certainly tomorrow morning and throughout the weekend to make sure you've got everything you need to know around the latest around the New Orleans Saints and free agency. So we appreciate you very much for being here. So when it comes to Andrus Peat, I think this was the right move for the New Orleans Saints to just let him walk and take the dead cap hit. Now, it is a big dead cap hit. It's 13 milli when it comes to the dead cap there, but you know what? You'll take it. And this right here, this decision right here is a sign of the New Orleans Saints trying to help themselves out and get a little bit more right when it comes to the salary cap in the future. That's one of the reasons why I think that this is the right decision. The other reason why I think that this is the right decision for the New Orleans Saints is that the market around Andrus Peat has got to be very confusing. It's got to be weird because he has played left guard in New Orleans effectively since his rookie season, right? Like he started at left tackle, moved inside, all those other things, and he's been a left guard. We just watched the guard market blow up. One of the highest guard contracts last year, I think it was $16 million per year. And we just watched Landon Dickerson get $21 million per year as an interior offensive lineman. Robert Hunt with the Miami Dolphins, $20 million a year. Goodness gracious. Like, there has been a lot of money spent on the interior offensive line market. And one of the reasons why is because, in general, offensive line play around the NFL is not good. And so when you get good players, you pay them. You saw the New Orleans Saints do it a year early with Cesar Ruiz, and thank goodness they did. Thank goodness they did, because they would have just spent $17, $18 million on him per year, potentially, had they signed him, had they waited to sign him until this season. So he got his contract extension. But now when it comes to Andrus Peat, not only are you in the year of the interior offensive lineman, you're also dealing with a guy that played the majority of his season last year, the healthiest season that he's had so far in his career, at left tackle, one of the NFL's most highly paid positions, and of course, one of the NFL's premier positions. So which market is his market? Unless he goes out there to explore it, the only thing that you can do is take from it what his representation tells you it is. And you can't do that. You can't be negotiated with by other teams that aren't negotiating. You can't do that. You have to have both sides of the conversation. So this is another situation to where I am certain the New Orleans Saints were not comfortable. And this is, when I say I'm certain, I mean it would make sense. Let me say it that way. It would make sense to me that the New Orleans Saints were not comfortable in committing any amount of money based on the interior offensive line skyrocket of average annual value, nor were they comfortable paying left tackle money when they still believe that Trevor Penning can come in and be their starting left tackle. So what do? See ya. Bye. Like, it's the only option. It was the only option unless you wanted to overpay for a veteran offensive lineman that you might be able to find a younger alternative to in this year's draft if you want to, right? Like, if you need that position so terribly, you can go to other free agents. I still think Dalton Risner makes a ton of sense. He has spent some time in these wide zone offenses. He's been with the Minnesota Vikings. He's been with the Denver Broncos. It all makes a lot of sense. Dalton Risner would work based on what's left available. You know, Onwenu would have been awesome too. Like, there would have been other guys that are great too. And there still are other guys that would have been good. John Feliciano coming out of the Kansas City Chiefs. Could be a good option, right? So you can find other options and you can pay them based on where they are, as opposed to sort of the nexus that's created around Andrus Peat's value. So you've got that, which to me is enough to say, nah, fam, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you. And then let him go on and test the market. And then maybe he comes back and says, hey, this was my market. What can you do for me? And then if the Saints can work with that, then they might bring him back. They might still re-sign him. He might still be in the black and gold in 2024. But I agree with the Saints' decision to not rush that choice. I wish they'd rush other choices. But I agree with them not rushing this choice. And so the other thing that I think that this helps you with is that it shows you that the New Orleans Saints are willing to, not necessarily, they're not here to take, remember, all right, my grandma, rest in peace. When I was a kid, this is a weird story. Hey, we're here. Well, when I was a kid, she had one of those little like rectangular boxes that had like a slot for Monday, a slot for Tuesday, a slot for Wednesday, a slot for Thursday. All that was like it was like per week had like little capsules, and in there she kept her medicine. Okay, and I remember as a kid walking by and going, "Dang, Grandma, you take a lot of medicine." I should have kept my mouth shut because I got batted upside the head for that one, but I did say that. What the New Orleans Saints are showing you right now is that they're not willing to take all their medicine, but they'll take a pill. How much for one rib? You know, they'll take a pill. And so I think that's what you're seeing right now, is that they are in position, which this is maybe a healthy display of where they are in terms of control of their salary cap versus the Los Angeles Chargers, who are shedding talent, the Miami Dolphins, who are shedding talent, the Buffalo Bills, who are shedding talent. Goes to show you that the Saints might have been right all along when it comes to their managing of the salary cap. But of course, things got a little bit tricky in 2020. Oh boy, isn't that just the truth? But it got really tricky for them when it came to their salary cap. And so there is some ground to make up. Mickey Loomis has said this publicly before. Hey, there's some ground to make up because of the, whatever millions of dollars that were lost. Because not only are you thinking about, oh my goodness. Not only are you thinking about the, not only are you thinking about the, it's my ancestors coming out. I'm like Caribbean, West Indian, all that stuff. So like not only do you have to think about the drop of the salary cap in 2020 in terms of where it was in 2019 to where it went in 2020, but you have to consider where it was supposed to go in 2020. It was supposed to go up, supposed to elevate. And it dropped, right? So not only did you lose where you started, you lost from where you were expected to be. And so, yeah, there was ground to make up. And I think that this move, the Saints saying, you know what, $13 million in dead cap, we'll deal with it. Fine. I think that tells you that maybe they're a little bit, let me rephrase that. I think it tells the national narrative that maybe the Saints are a little bit healthier in their salary cap choices than most people think. Just saying. No, I don't think it's a bad choice. Doesn't mean that Andrus Peat won't be back, but it feels like there's like hoops that they want everybody to not hoops that they want to. It's like qualifications, boxes that they want to check. There we go, boxes that they want to check before they make that decision, and I think that's wise. All right, y'all. We appreciate you very much as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen today. Did the New Orleans Pelicans get exposed by the Cleveland Cavaliers in the blender last night? Jake Madison's got more for you over at Locked On Pelicans. And of course, Locked On LSU. The ladies are about to embark upon some March Madness. You want to be caught up with all that with Caroline Fenton. Appreciate you very much as always. Make it Locked On Saints part of your day, part of your routine for saying yes to me and the show. As always, if you see me, please say hi. Need anything else around your New Orleans Saints in between these episodes, make sure you follow me on your favorite social media at Ross Jackson, NOLA. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you living. Let me know how you momming them. I trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.